Bé, molt bon dia a tothom. Abans de presentar-vos al conferenciant, aquests dies jo crec que ens aixequem tots, com mai, posem la ràdio, fem la lectura amb temes internacionals, perquè de cop, doncs, en poc d'una setmana, ens ha canviat a tots una mica la situació, no? I jo avui, només despertar-me, he pensat, fa 4 anys, semblava que la guerra d'Ucraïna, tal com explicava Rússia, seria qüestió d'un mes i porten 4 anys, no? Llavors, quan avui llegia, això s'arreglarà en 4 setmanes, pensava, no sé, on s'han anat tots els desitjos de pau que tenen molt a veure també amb la conferència d'avui, i també tenia molt present, perquè pràcticament no ha tingut ressò amb els mitjans de comunicació, els 60 anys de la caputxinada d'ahir, que em sap molt de greu, jo no hi era, jo era molt jove en aquell moment, no hi era, però la gent que va participar, la gent que va fer la taula rodona, que eren gent amb un compromís altíssim, gent que ara en aquests moments doncs, són ja molt grans, que van tenir un gran paper, i aquest país no ho mira, no? No apareix en els diaris, no va venir, perdó, ningú del govern, eh, com si una de les coses més importants, jo crec que va passar a finals del franquisme, l'any 66, doncs la gent que va lluitar tant, no? Hi havia un sindicalista que va fer molta gràcia perquè quan parlava tenia una força que el senties, i havia estat 11 vegades detingut. 11 vegades havia anat a la presó, amb diferents condemnes. Això ho expliques avui i, perdoneu, faig una petita introducció, però una mica per resituar que aquesta és una casa que defensa, ja ho sabeu, doncs les solucions alternatives als conflictes, que està contra qualsevol manifestació de violència, ja no parlo només de guerra, sinó la possibilitat, i una de les raons doncs, per les que avui fem aquesta conferència amb caràcter internacional i que no sempre tenim aquesta oportunitat, és precisament per posar sempre l'accent en la possibilitat de solucions pactades als diferents conflictes. Bon dia, doutor Faleck. Seja bem-vindo a Síndic de Greuges, institución que protege los derechos de los ciudadanos de Cataluña. Hoy vamos a conocer a su experiencia en cuanto mediador internacional, especialista en resolver conflictos en situacions de catástrofe. Muito obrigada per ter aceitado o nosso convite. El doctor Diego Faleck és llicenciat en Dret per la Universitat de Harvard, i em fa gràcia perquè alguna conversa que he tingut amb algunes de les assessores deien: nosaltres vam aprendre de Harvard la solució adversarial dels conflictes. Doncs no, Harvard no només és adversarial. Ell és doctor també per la Universitat de São Paulo, és mediador internacional, té una trajectòria, jo m'atreviria a dir que única, en casos altament complexos i en situacions de crisi, com ara plans de compensació per víctimes, per exemple, d'accidents aeris. Hi ha un que va ser molt conegut fa uns anys, d'un avió a Brasil, grans tragèdies mediambientals. Ell ha ocupat també càrrecs importants en el govern en matèria de defensa de la competència i protecció del consumidor. En aquests moments, crec que ho podria dir sense equivocar-me massa, que és un destacat líder d'opinió mundial i el mediador més reconegut de tot el Brasil. Brasil no és un país petit com per fer una afirmació com aquesta. Em plau molt tenir-lo aquí i que ens parli des de la seva experiència del disseny de sistemes de resolució de conflictes per casos complexos. Ja sabeu que sempre que tenim alguna oportunitat aquí al síndic de portar persones que treballin amb resolució alternatives de conflictes, és una de les coses importants que jo crec que aquesta institució vol reflectir, i per tant la possibilitat de tenir un mediador internacional és molt important, i vull agrair al Paco Jiménez Salinas, que de pas és nebot meu, per tant, però que ens va avisar ja fa molt de temps que hi hauria aquesta possibilitat, i per tant aprofitar a la possibilitat de que algunes persones d'aquest prestigi internacional accedeixin aquí. És un gran honor per nosaltres i ja, doncs, li deixo amb ell la paraula, obrigada. Y portuñol sería perfecto, pero vamos a poner traducción del inglés, ya lo sabéis, y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Es un gran honor estar aquí. I thank you very much. It's a really great pleasure to discuss these issues with you. The topic I will address is dispute systems design. It's what we can call diseño de sistemas de solución de conflictos. Closer, yeah. What is dispute systems design? It's about the intentional organization of resources and procedures, and you can say like rules of governance to better resolve conflicts. You do, instead of, let's say, fixing the airplane while it's flying, you build it first, and then you take off as a compensation system. I'm going to talk about aircraft accidents, so the metaphor is applicable. So, do I change here? Okay. Oh, sorry. So I will address, I'll do it by telling you a story. I'm going to talk about a few of the Brazilian cases and some international cases, but I will address mostly the cases we have worked on. Here's Luis, my partner as well. Those are some of the cases we work on. I'll start with the first one, so how everything started and how everything happened, so that you have a clear idea. I think we are all different legal systems in the world. We have the way we do things, and sometimes it's about changing. We were discussing before how difficult it is to change. Like when you go talk to an institution, they say, great idea, but we cannot do it. We do it in a different way, and it's all set up. So I'm going to tell a story about how we first did it in a different way and how it became, let's say, the practice on many cases. It's a story that happened 18 years ago. I'll start talking about the TAM case. So it was 17 July 2007, and an airplane crashed in the heart of the city of São Paulo. We have an airport inside the city, airport of Congonhas. The flight was landing. It just went across the lane and crashed into a building next door to the airport. And at that moment, 199 people lost their lives, and maybe hundreds of potential compensation lawsuits began. So what was, and then I'm going to take a look on the view of compensating victims only. You have different aspects. You have the criminal aspects. You have the technical aspects to understand the causes. I'm going to focus on victims' compensation. Victims' compensation is very, very important. The financial, it seems like there are other important things, but it's really important to compensate people. Some people lose their livelihood, some people lose their parents, and I think it's a very important aspect of crisis management. It's something we really have to tackle. So we talk about dispute systems design, like designing. When you talk design, you say intentionally, something by design. There's always an existing system. I even say we should rename the theory about redesigning dispute resolution systems, because there's always a system in place. So how was the system at the time in Brazil? You would have individual negotiation with the victim would have to negotiate with the airline or the insurer. And if that doesn't work, you would go to negotiation. What was the problem? And then we start you always start when you want to redesign something, you always start with a diagnose. So what is wrong with the existing? Is there anything wrong with the existing system? So what was the problem with the existing system? So when you have a disaster, I'll start with the airline, and then we go to environmental disasters. We can, but every disaster, there's a lot of anger in the population, a lot of anger from people, from close people, from the media. It's a lot of anger. There's a lot of distrust. The company did that because they wanted to save money. These people only care about making money. So there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of high expectations as to the awards, how much money people will make. There are lawyers, there are people coming in and say, you're going to make millions. And there's also fear because you have power imbalance. You have the big company, the bigger insurers, actually the markets in London that will compensate, and then have all those international lawyers, and the victim, maybe his uncle or his friend from school will represent him. So you have a great power imbalance at times in this type of case. So what happens then in this type of cases? You have a high level of litigation because negotiations are difficult. They're often full of emotions. Normally, companies, lawyers, they would say they don't treat everybody equally. Those who are more, loud, they get more money, who has connections. Those who are more easygoing sometimes get less money. So because of that, there's a lot of distrust. And then you have, and that's research. I mean, we've looked into cases in the 90s, early 2000s, and that's global. I saw that pattern in the United States. You have a high level of litigation. Some cases in Brazil had 80%, 60%, 70%, and that happens worldwide. And then you also have what we call the forum shopping. I've worked also in the Air France case. I'm going to talk about some of the lawyers and claimants. They file lawsuits all over the globe. Now there's the manufacturer of a part of the airplane in the United States. So let's try to fight there, or maybe something. There's a parent company in Spain. Let's fight in Spain. So they try to foreign shopping and see which jurisdiction pays more, let's say, or easier. So it was a big problem. I mean, I could see that those families would have to go to what we call a judicial via crucis. Like in Brazil, it takes 20 years to get compensation. 20 years, not exaggerating. And then as a dispute systems designer, is there a new system? Is there something different that we can do? Something that can give people better outcomes? And the answer was yes. I was in the government. I was the chief of staff of the Secretariat of Economic Law. It's antitrust consumer protection in the Ministry of Justice. I had just come back from my LLM at Harvard, and I just had the dispute systems design class. And it was actually a 1-credit course, a reading group. But we got to read all the cases about September 11th compensation fund, asbestos, the UN Commission. So there were many cases, not only in the US, the international cases. So I started saying, well, there's something we can do to deal with the challenges. So remember, the challenges were basically distrust, anger, emotions. How do you deal with that? And the answer is, if you build something people can trust, it is going to work. That's a strong word. Well, something people can, but what is something trustworthy? What are the features of something that people can trust? And then goes our big words here. Something that is transparent, that people know what will happen, no surprises. You know the procedure, you know the path, you know what you need to do, you know what's going to happen, you know the criteria. Something that has equal treatment, that no son of a politician or no loud leader of an association gets different treatment. Everybody gets treated the same. That's trustworthy because you know, and you have to treat people equally, not because you are nice, but because people talk. And they negotiate with you, and the community talks. So we talk about confidentiality. I don't believe in confidentiality. I think, especially when you're dealing with masses of people, people talk, and if they understand that similar situations are being treated differently, you lose trust. So equal treatment is something that you have to strive for. Objective criteria. I mean, it comes from all the Harvard theory. You need to base negotiations on market standard rulings of courts. It has to be objective, not subjective. We will talk a lot. We'll talk a little more about how do you organize the compensation criteria. Not only compensation, eligibility criteria, standards of evidence. You have to set all the standards beforehand. There's a lot to say. There's a concept that I learned in the United States, was difficult to apply in Brazil, but we now do apply it, and I think it's very interesting. The doctrine used to call it rough justice. Rough is not a good word. I don't know how you translate it to Spanish, like dura, justicia dura. It's aproximada, justiça aproximada. Sí,
no polida.
no polida. Justicia no polida. Sí. Because it's very, I mean, the one of the most difficult challenges in compensation is, I mean, people don't have evidence. They don't have documents, and sometimes it's hard to prove some things, and sometimes you have to devise formulas like, well, everybody gets 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000. This is how it's done. It's better than spending 8 years doing some sort of economic study that will not be conclusive. And then just a parenthesis, we were dealing with fisherman compensation in the Rio Doce Dam break. I'm going to talk about it. And you had to compensate the people that could go fishing for extra protein, very vulnerable communities. You're not sure if they did or they did not, but they could, and they lost this opportunity. And how much do you pay them? And you get like thousands of people, and really 100,000 people. How do you calculate this? Like, the price of protein and how much he saves. There are so many criteria you can do that. You can really spend. And we heard, like, we call the greatest specialists in the world, we call them, and they say it's going to take 8 years. It's not going to be precise. It's better just fix an amount and pay everybody. So you make we also call it possible justice. There are different names. We hear like rough justice, streamlined justice, possible justice. There are different ways to say imperfection is necessary to make it happen. So sometimes you also have to devise smart, intelligent types of compensation criteria when the case is difficult. Government participation. And the government participation, remember, this is all about building something trustworthy. And the government brings legitimacy, makes something trustworthy. I was just was just discussing with Paco, and I was studying like a recent case you have here, this very recent agreement with the Catholic Church, the compensation program in which Defensoria will handle. So that's that's great, and congratulations for this. This is it's people will trust and people will come because there's such a powerful institution behind. So involving government, even in a private thing like in a plane crash, makes people trust and avoid those challenges that we had that make people go to litigation. Efficiency. We have a saying in Brazil, is one of I think one of our only statesman that we really admire, Rui Barbosa. He says, "Late justice is not justice," and you really have to figure out, and that's what we say. I mean, you cannot design a process that mimics the judiciary, that takes, the expert, evaluations in long times and the adversarial method. If you mimic that when you're designing a new system, it's going to take long, and then it doesn't make sense. And then what we call procedural justice, which is very important. I think one of the greatest things that we learned from the Americans, but when we applied in Brazil, we were really extra concerned about procedural justice, is how to make the process humane. So people need to have voice. People need to tell the stories. They need to have some sort of participation in how the agreement is made. We discuss about restorative justice and humanizing the process. So there's this model. Sometimes it's very difficult to create restorative justice processes with, the airline and the victims. It's maybe difficult. So what we do, I think that can be done, but what we did, not we are doing, is that we try to insert those elements, of those human elements, in the compensation process. Because normally I see cases like in the UK, there was this fire in a building. The compensation process is very cold. It's like litigation lawyers settling and allocating money. People don't get hurt and anything. And then they try some restorative justice process. Maybe it's better to get the human, and we see that's very powerful in the compensation programs. You have a session, you use facilitators, you use mediators, you get this moment to really understand people's problems, and then we use organized ADR procedures, mediation, facilitation. I think it's critical. When you have all that, you have a system people can trust, and you probably be very successful resolving your problem. I like to cite Sun Tzu, like he wrote about the art of war. We're doing the opposite here. It's like the art of peacemaking. But what Sun Tzu was right, that when you know all the elements and you have it all, you win the war before the first drop of blood hits the floor. So that's the idea. When you got everybody at the table, when you have consensus, when you have agreement, when you have participation, your compensation program is successful before you open. So that's set up the stage. That's about designing the dispute resolution system. So you have a lot of heavy lifting to do this preparation, the groundwork to design a dispute resolution system. So what are the legal issues? It's a lot of lawyer work, all sorts of topics that are going to be discussed. You need to understand from the communities, from the people, what type of damages they suffer, what are their pains. So you need to know the damages. You need to come up with compensation eligibility criteria, proof of damages. You need to make a lot of options in terms of, will I be flexible, more flexible, less flexible, and all that has to do with efficiency. You need to understand all the channels and doors that are available for a person to resolve that dispute, how it works, why it's good, why it's bad, because you're designing something that needs to be a better channel, a better door. You know, you probably heard about the multi-door courthouse or the multi-door. There are many doors. You can go to court, you can talk directly to the company. The thing is, you're designing a new door. It's an optional door. It has to be a good option. So you have to understand what is available and make something better. You need to map out the stakeholders. Remember, the good thing about dispute systems design is that you map and you bring all stakeholders to the table and you agree on the rules of the compensation system. But if you are the convener, if you're really the person, and as I was at the secretariat in Brazil, I needed to see who are the highest value players, who should be involved, who could be a blocker. There's a lovely book. It's called Negotiation 3D. It's from David Lex and James Sabinius from Harvard Business School. It's a wonderful book about mapping, people organizing. They say you need to map, and I'm going to talk about it for a second. You need to map people backwards. So who needs to give the final decision? Needs to be the last one involved. You get all the others to create momentum so that you have a final decision. After you get everybody in, after you agree on everything, you design a system, how it's going to work, all the documents and everything. You implement and you do a constant evaluation. I actually teach a one semester course about this, so I'm trying to be very, 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 short here about all those steps of dispute system design. But this is just to give you a glimpse. This is me. I was 31 years old. And this is the meeting with the families of the aircraft accident. It was very interesting because when they were together, you probably lived through those situations. They're very angry. Like when they're in the collective, you can see anger. When you talk to them individually, you can see pain. And then that's very, so it's, and there's a lot to talk about this, how you involve the families and bring them in the process. A little bit about stakeholder mapping, the right sequence. So I was working in the Ministry of Justice, the federal level. The case involved two states, and I had the idea. I studied all the September 11th compensation fund cases, and I recommend to you, if you haven't watched, there's a movie in Netflix called Worth. It's the story of Ken Feinberg, who's actually a person that I'm pretty inspired on, and he designed the September 11th compensation fund after the terror. It's a wonderful film. Lots of myths and realities there, but it's a good start to understand this idea of how he organized the compensation program for the victims. I really recommend. So I was there. I was inspired by Feinberg and others, and McGovern and other big names, and I thought I could do something. So the first thing I needed to do is convince my boss. Very difficult, very difficult. But eventually I did. It took 9 months. It was really like a pregnancy, having this case on. So I convinced my boss. Long story, the most difficult part. But once I did convince her, I needed to talk to other people. So the Defensoria was the first one I knocked in São Paulo. Wonderful people. They had work on different cases. So when I sat down with them, they said, God, this is amazing. Why haven't we thought about this before? So they were on board. With Defensoria on board, we went to the public prosecutors. Tough people. I was scared to talk to them. But they actually said, whoa, amazing. We need to, we never really solved the problems. We always litigate that. Let's give it a shot. So we got the prosecutors in, and then we got consumer protection agencies. And then with all these authorities together in this idea, we went to talk to the family of the victims. And the family of the victims, they were a bit skeptical. They said, well, we don't know if the airline will agree to that, but it's optional. If they do, great, fine. With the family saying, okay, skeptical, but saying, okay, we went to talk to the airline. A lot of pressure, long story. We got them in, and then they were really tough with the insurers, tough negotiation. They convinced the insurers and the reinsurers. The actual last person that needed to sign off was AIG in London. They were the reinsurance that gave the final yes. So that's when they say yes, we have a program. So a little bit about the whole, because designing a system it's political and technical. It's not only technical, it's about getting everybody in. Challenges, political risks. My boss, she told me, why would we in the Ministry of Justice take the responsibility on the price of human life? This is a problem of the judicial branch. Why? And there's the saying like, no good deed goes unpunished. So they say, why is the federal government trying to save the airline? I mean, people will think there's some conspiracy theory behind it. And then she said no in the beginning. And I was so frustrated. I said, no, come on. we can't do something. So and with the negotiation classes I had, I was able to find a solution. I told my boss, like, listen, we from the Ministry of Justice, we will not define compensation criteria. We will just facilitate, kind of mediate the prosecutors and the defenders, because they negotiate on behalf of people. They are used to it. And she allowed me. I could only mediate. I could not take care of substantive matters. So I got a little more. She never believed I will pull it out. She let me play more a little bit. So that's one thing to handle, like political risks. Public versus private distrust. Always there. I mean, it's nature. So a lot I could talk hours about this. Principal agent issues, like imagine you're the head of the legal department of the airline, and this crazy guy comes with an idea like, let's do it differently. Let's create a compensation program with mediation. And he would think, God, if it doesn't work, the blame is on me. If it works, doesn't change my life. I get my salary and everything. And if I do nothing, people don't expect nothing from me. I'm fine. I don't want to do that. So, and you have like we say, like the lawyers, how much money will the lawyer make if it's a consensual system versus if it's, so you have all kinds of maybe there are good, incentives. The new CEO of the airline came and he needs to present a solution. The point is you have to map out the people and the players. They're not a block. It's not like one block on the other side. There's different interests from principals and agents on every institution, and you have to map that out on your strategy to make it happen for good and for bad. You have to deal with that. When you deal with the collective treatment, the courts have standards. For example, sometimes courts have a cap. Like we compensate families and we have a cap for that. When you're offering money through a program, how do you work with caps that courts? So I'm not going to spend hours on this, but when you do something out of court, you may have conflicts with what the court do and how you handle that. So you have to be clever to anticipate those. And in 2007, Brazil, I didn't know any mediator, like active media. I had not mediated any case myself, so there were no mediators in Brazil. So we needed a lot of education and motivation to build this mediation group. Now we have a developed market, but you always need to there's a saying, like, when you hire a mediator, I hired a mediator. You don't say much, because there's so many different styles. There's so many different contexts. You have to really educate and create like a profile and a program for the specific context. So education and motivation is often a challenge. This is a little bit just for you to get an idea how the procedure looks like. I apologize, it doesn't look very nice, but yeah, I'm not an expert on PowerPoints. We started, it was very sophisticated. We started with the early neutral evaluation. So the families would talk to us. No commitment. So how does your program work? What are my options? Can I file a lawsuit in the United States? Can I file a lawsuit anywhere else? We would discuss with them, like, yeah. So, for example, what is the compensation criteria? I have many. The family has many siblings. The siblings get compensated in Brazil. So so you would have early neutral evaluators. It's a form of ADR. We started with that. Once the family said, yeah, that's the option I want to come in, we will have the claim intake. They will fill in the forms. They will have a meeting with the mediator, a facilitator that will explain what is needed, help them gather the documents, and they will file their claim within the system. All these documents would be sent to the company, to the convener, who has lawyers, technical experts that would analyze the information. When they come back with the proposal, we have a mediation to discuss. This is the proposal. Is there any error, anything? Sometimes you have to go back and forth. There are lots of nuances on this, but just to make it short, and then you have a final proposal. We did that in the TAM case. We had an advisory arbitration committee. So, for example, there would be negotiations were difficult because of a specific point. One point I can mention, for example, progression of function, as we say. So when a person dies in Brazil, there are different systems. But in Brazil, the money that the person made at that moment is how calculation is made. I think in France, in other countries, you take into consideration the progression in the career. That makes things much more difficult. But in Brazil, if you have proof or imminence of promotion, you should factor that in. And that's some conflicts around that. So there was a very expedite arbitration panel. The Defensoria was actually handling, the Defensoria and the prosecutors, 1 page, 1 week, 1 page response, like an expedite, non-binding arbitration. The people will come back to the negotiation table, to the mediation table with this decision or this opinion. And that happened 38 times, and all of the times it happened, people settle around those terms. And then payment. It's just a little idea on how the TAM case worked. It was a local case. Just to continue on that, I took a little bit of time to explain this case because it's the DNA. And then it makes easy to comment on the other cases. So as I said, we had 9 months, 80 families. We had around 30 settlements for the families. It was actually the system, because there was a lot of litigation already before we were able to make it to open the program. But everybody settled around, they came into the facility and they settled around our terms. So we settled like in 1 year, we attracted everybody to us or to our standards, and we settled 92% of the case in less than 2 years. Yeah. It had a great repercussion. The Minister of Justice at the time, I mean, people would only come to his office to complain. He got a lot of heat from the media all the time. And in the first time in his life, he was getting compliments. And people would come to say thank you. So it was really, really good. And he also asked me, like, can we make it permanent? And I said, no, you have to design a case for every context. It was then that we had a second, it was 2007, 2009, we had a second aircraft accident. And now this time international. The Air France flight, Rio, Paris. It's the same DNA, 32 nationalities involved. We had to create a track for foreigners, residents in Brazil. I was negotiating with the French government. They were reluctant. Time was passing by. We decided to do a program for Brazilians and foreigners living in Brazil. Later, France did some conciliation. They kind of tried to copy like years later. But the reinsurers, AXA, they said Brazil, the system we designed out of the 32 nationalities, including the United States, was the smoothest compensation. So the people, the reinsurers said it was really, really, they said that less money came out of their pockets and more money came into the victims' pockets because we cut transactional costs. Now, just to give you an idea, I know I'm running out of time, but just to give you an idea, we then had in 2015 the Mariana Dam break, and that's a huge case. So we get the airline case that I thought was the most challenging thing I've done in my life was easy compared to Mariana, because there was 199 victims. You had a list, easy. Mariana, today we can see that almost 500,000 people were claiming, like 500,000 people were claiming compensation in this case. So what happened there? Una presa, like a dam, broke. The mud entered the river flow for 700 kilometers, damaging fishermen, businesses and extractors, agriculture. They created a foundation, like the largest foundation in the world. They put a lot of money in this foundation and they started compensating people. So we compensated people, the cities that were out of water supply for weeks, days, financial aids, damages. We used a mediation program and around 6 billion euros of compensation. I don't know if you heard about this, but there's this class action in the UK, in Liverpool actually, which is the biggest class action in the history of the United Kingdom. And some litigation funds are discussing this case, trying to involve more people in the compensation. And recently this year, the program was reopened. We call it PIG, the definitive compensation program, where we included 300,000 people more. We're actually working, Luis is leading on behalf of our firm this case, and we have over 100 people like mediating, facilitating full time with the victims to get them to get compensation. The same DNA, everything organized, criteria, everything that I mentioned. This is how the dam break looked like. The city of Bento was devastated by the mud, just for you to get a feeling of what happened. We had another dam break, the Brumadinho. There was in Brazil, we had a tough years, like 4 years after one partner of the same mining structure, Vale, had a dam. It broke. This case was worse. In the Mariana case, 19 people lost their lives. In this case, 272 people lost their lives. And when you have to deal with death, makes things much more emotional, much more difficult. This case was really organized. The Mariana case was too political. The creation of a foundation, I'm not sure it was a good idea. And there is a lot to discuss. The direct involvement of the company with the use of facilitators, with the process design, made things much more efficient. So there's a lot of discussion around those, but the Brumadinho model is a huge success in terms of efficiency and delivering compensation and satisfaction. This is me. I was able to find this guy here is wearing the Corinthians soccer team shirt, the one I support. It was a very far state, so it was nice to find someone that support Corinthians there. So that was the first settlement agreement we signed in this case. Just to wrap up this case, which for us is the state of the art of our work. This is the Maceió subsidence case. So basically, there was a plant of rock salt mining in the northeast of Brazil. We had 6% of a city sinking because of the salt mining. They dig holes of 1 kilometer depth and 80 meters range, and there was like, well, some homes are cracking. We don't know what's happening. Years like with expert reports trying to see, and at some point the company says we need to compensate people because people may die if the homes sink. So we did like the COVID hospitals initiatives that you build something in 1 month. So once the company decided to compensate, we built something in 1 month. Like we designed, it was crazy. We designed the system so that no casualties happens and no one was harmed. And it was very, very effective. The same ideas that I presented here, we compensated 85,000 people, acquisition of homes, we paid damages, commerces, soccer stadiums, even a cemetery was relocated. It was a crazy thing. It was a very big thing. Yeah. And we had a 99.6% settlement rate. Sorry, just this is like the facilities. This is my team that work on the case, and this is the facilities we built. Just to finish up, we're talking a lot about tragedies, but this kind of system can work on any type of mass compensation. We are studying and discussing here in Spain the truck cartel. I don't know if you heard about it. So all the Daimler, Volvo, Iveco, Scania, they had a cartel. They fixed prices for selling trucks. The European Commission decided that it was a cartel. Private litigation started. We have some data. I don't know how sharp it is, but we hear like 1,400 companies, 3,000 trucks owners file class actions. The Spanish Supreme Court awarded compensation of 5% unless expert evidence shows otherwise. So there's a little space there, but there was the Audiencias Provinciales have awarded damages from 5 to 15. So this is a very complex case, and we believe that by using our because you have several challenges there. You have the nuances of calculation. You have joint and several liability of all the claimants. You have difficulty in dialogue. So maybe what we think is that the methodology we've explained here on this case is like getting everybody sitting on the table, creating consensus around the governance criteria, creating an efficient compensation machine and humanized can make this. It's just one idea because I don't want you to think it's only about tragedies and compensation. There are multiple ways you can use this technology. I'm sorry for using much of the time. And thank you.
Obrigada, muchas gracias. Al escucharlo, claro, lo primero que se me ha venido a la cabeza es Dana y cómo está la situación en mutatis mutandi, ¿no? La reflexión es, y teniendo en cuenta las catástrofes naturales que todos los años las vemos, pues o nos preparamos o si no, nos iríamos a esto. Però teniu vosaltres la paraula. Però a mi m'ha vingut en el cap, quan el sentia, automàticament Dana, València, que no sé ben bé com està la situació, però tothom està descontent. I quan tothom està descontent significa que alguna cosa no va. Sí? Tu, Jordi, també? Tu també havies demanat, Jordi? Després. Doncs vinga. En inglés.
Castellano no comprendo catalán.
¿Castellano?
Lo mejor es portuñol. Lo mejor es portuñol, insisto.
No, a ver, es medio pregunta, medio comentario y además es un poco para los dos, ¿no? Porque a mí me parece muy interesante toda esta parte de la credibilidad de lo público, es decir, la legitimidad de lo público. Cuando tienes pagadores privados, ¿no? Aquí en el tema de la Dana, por ejemplo, tenemos al consorcio de compensación, que es un gran sistema de gobernanza, ¿no? Y que incorpora esta parte de lo público que de alguna manera reduce la desconfianza o debería reducir la desconfianza. Yo creo que en parte lo logra. Pero cuando se trata de lo privado, y aquí tenemos en España tenemos el apagón de las eléctricas. Todavía se tienen que venir tenemos que decidir cómo se van a tener que pagar el apagón de las eléctricas. Hubo el caso en Andalucía también de las inspecciones de los cánceres de mama y todo este tema, que va también a surgir una cantidad de demandas enorme. Hay muchos ámbitos de compensación en donde lo público, el elemento público solo está cuando llegas al juzgado y entonces tienes al juez, ¿no? Pero no en la parte previa, en donde se hace un intento de pago, en donde el hecho de que el pagador sea privado puede generar una gran desconfianza porque dices, bueno, el pagador, su interés es pagar menos, ¿no? A lo mejor no. Entonces, esta parte de incorporar un elemento institucional, por ejemplo, en el caso que tú hablabas de la defensoría en Brasil. Entonces, ¿cuál puede ser el rol? Porque muchas veces cuando hemos hablado con defensorías aquí en España, y no hablo aquí, pero te pueden contestar diciendo, bueno, no es mi mandato o no es nuestro mandato, ¿no? Yo también he trabajado en defensorías y también la palabra esta de es mi mandato, pues es algo que surge en la conversación. Pero y luego tenemos el caso del caso de los abusos sexuales por parte de la Iglesia, en las compensaciones, en donde parece ser que el defensor del pueblo sí adopta un rol de monitoreo del pago de las compensaciones, no solo en la parte de la investigación, sino en la parte de monitorear y acompañar el pago de las compensaciones. Entonces, digamos, ¿es así que el mandato es tan restrictivo que impide tener algún rol, no sé? ¿Cuál es la contestación respecto a esta cuestión del mandato de las defensorías en estos aspectos?
Can I start?
Yes,
Yeah.
you start.
There is a general mandate of institutions to resolve things amicably through mediation, ADR. Probably you have this national, every country has this, I don't know if you have this, but to kind of foster the alternative dispute resolution or the adequate dispute resolution, as you call it. So there's a general mandate. The let's say the administrative law, let's say basis would be a theory of what we call the problem-solving regulation. So you don't actually have the mandate to, let's say, interfere on a private problem. But if the person comes to you and makes an agreement and says, I'm going to follow this plan that I agree with you, and you will monitor me. Then you have let's say, an agreement. You regulate through an agreement. They were not subject to you, but they can be if they agree. What is the trade-off? People that want to do the right thing gets legitimacy to the right thing they're trying to do. And the Defensoria gets a public interest problem solved in the way she thinks needs to be solved, or she believes is the right way to solve. So you get it. It's like you get a court ruling, but you agree to that on the criteria. So it's a trade-off, and you're much more effective than litigating. And then what role you can have in the day-to-day work? Monitoring, receiving information, claims, the advisory arbitration role. There can be many roles according to how you agree.
Yo intervendré al final.
Yeah.
On the end. And
Gracias, Diego, por tu exposición. Dos preguntas. He entendido que cuando iniciaste el procedimiento en relación al accidente de aviación, estabas trabajando en el Ministerio de Justicia, y entiendo que en ese caso te dirigiste, digamos, a la Defensoría como representante del Ministerio de Justicia, por lo tanto, de organismo público a organismo público. En este caso, si nos puedes explicar cuál fue el rol que realizó la Defensoría en ese procedimiento. Y ahora entiendo que para otro tipo de procedimientos tú estás interviniendo ya no en tu capacidad pública, sino en este caso como una organización de mediación privada, por decirlo de alguna manera. En los casos en que estás actuando como privado, por decirlo de alguna manera, actúas a demanda de las instituciones públicas, a demanda de las víctimas y sus familias, actúas por iniciativa propia, y en estos casos...
Sí, perfecto.
Y en estos casos, actuando como organización privada, ¿cómo aceptan los organismos públicos trabajar contigo como organización privada? Serían estos dos aspectos.
Sí, so in the TAM case, the role of the Public Defender's Office was to negotiate, be a part of a group negotiators with the company and the insurers on the compensation criteria, eligibility criteria, evidence criteria. So they were negotiating until they come to terms that the public defender said, this, I agree. So they were at this table to legitimize the governance, how the process was going to be, how the mediators would be hired and trained. So all the package, they were negotiating before starting. When we started, the Defensoria received information. We had the board that received information. We had a meeting every 2 months, like a board meeting, to see what is happening. For example, the minimum wage in Brazil changed, and then we had a board meeting. Shall we pay now in the new wage or the old? What we do with so there's always problems, and then they were part of the board helping to resolve the problems. And monitoring, and if something went wrong, they would go to the company and say, do it, resolve this. For example, there was actually, there was a flight attendant that had a same-sex relationship that was unknown to the family that had to share the compensation. So the public defenders sat with they said, why don't you pay both of them? Like, we are helping you organizing this, like, be generous. So the day-to-day things, so that was basically the role, monitoring, and then they were part of this advisory arbitration. They had arbitrators in the town. So how do we work? We when there's a tragedy, companies call us and we tell them, listen, this is the checklist. You have to understand, you have to talk to people, the communities, have to map all my slide about legal issues. So I said, this is what you have to do. But we, like our firm, we will not help you devise compensation criteria. You hire your lawyers. We don't get into the substance, only the form. When we work as facilitators, we tell the families and say, we are being paid by the company because they have to pay for all the costs, but we do not decide on how much you get. We do not decide on anything, and we help them discuss. So we are probably the people who send information to the authorities. We manage those relationships, family, company, authorities. In this dam break case, that the new pact, the public defender's office, they didn't have staff to handle like thousands of claims. So the company, the mining company, hired us. The defenders agree with it because we have such a good relationship. And they said, like, you will staff the defender's office. So we work for them under their command to help them handle the poor families, the vulnerable families. So I think our neutrality comes from the fact that we do not decide on anything that harms anybody. We are just about process. We're just about, and very transparent about our compensation and everything.
No sé si ha contestado el tema de que el rol de la defensoría cuando actúas como entidad privada. ¿Ya está? Ok.
Hay dos.
Sí, gracias. Buenos días. Usted hablaba en la exposición de la importancia de tener el paraguas de lo público para dar mayor tranquilidad a la gente que se queja y que quiere demandar, ¿no? ¿Qué ocurre en los casos? Y voy un poco a lo que decía la síndica del tema Dana, que se nos viene a la cabeza. ¿Qué ocurre en los casos en los que precisamente la administración pública es el objetivo de queja principal del damnificado? ¿Cómo se puede mediar de una manera más eficiente en esos términos? Y en el caso de España, que antes Paco comentaba lo de la importancia del paraguas que tenemos, de la compensación de seguros, eso funciona, es un ejemplo único en el mundo, pero para poder recibir compensaciones económicas, la gente tiene que estar asegurada. Y hay mucha gente en muchos escenarios que, por ejemplo, pasó en la Dana y pasó en otras situaciones en España, que la gente ha reclamado, pero no tenía un seguro previo, con lo cual, en el caso de España, se genera una controversia. ¿De qué manera se puede mediar también al nivel que usted está liderando esas operaciones en el mundo? Gracias.
So if I understand right, the first question is when the government has to compensate, how can
damnificado tiene más miedo, tiene más quejas del poder público que del poder privado.
Sí. It's interesting because in Brazil, like I thought, like, nobody trusts the government, but in the end, when you create a fair process, and I think you humanize the process, there is the power of the institution and there is the power of the process. So what you have to do is create a process where people are heard, where, for example, the Dana case, the industrial damages, the system is really based on expert reports. That for us, it's adversarial. It becomes adversarial. You show one expert, the other one shows the expert. You need a third expert. So sometimes the government could be open for, devising formulas, different ways. So to make short, if you improve the system and the program and deliver a good service of compensation, you get trust. The trust is there. The institution has a name. So you can revert trust if you work well. That's my answer. And that's what we did, and that's what worked. In the end, people want to trust the government. That's my thought. Your second question was not insured.
Sí, la obligación para ser compensado en España necesitas estar asegurado. O sea, la institución que compensa, que es un ejemplo único en el mundo, que cuando hay una desgracia no paga una compañía de seguros, hay un fondo de compensación general, ¿no? Pero para poder ser beneficiario de esa compensación, tienes que estar previamente asegurado. Por ejemplo, en la Dana, nadie puede reclamar un seguro de vivienda si no tenía un seguro de vivienda previamente. Yo no sé si estos...
Hay seguro.
Sí, pero bueno, pero si no hay un seguro, ya no puedes reclamar. Sí. Entonces, yo no sé si en los sistemas de mediación que usted está desarrollando, si también se ha encontrado con ese problema y si hay algún tipo de salida también para esos damnificados.
I would say, unfortunately, it is what it is. If you're not covered, that's the rule. We had cases in Brazil, the fire on the nightclub in Brazil. The government didn't take responsibility. Nobody got paid. There was no insurance. So what I see is that the substance, unless there is an agreement to change, no, there's no solution.
Muito obrigado. Me parece fascinante lo que nos ha explicado porque, claro, nosotros hasta ahora, o al menos yo hablo por mí, tan solo conocía lo que era la mediación restaurativa, ¿no?, en gestión de conflictos, pero con pocas víctimas. Claro, yo hablar de tantas víctimas me parece fascinante, ¿no? Entonces, claro, me sorprende mucho en todos los casos que ha expuesto la alienación de todas las partes. Es decir, parece, ¿no? Alineación,
¿Alineación?
Es decir, que todos hablaran el mismo lenguaje, ¿no? Es decir, que todos estaban, ¿no?, a favor de llevar a cabo esta mediación, ¿no?, con tantas víctimas. Entonces, ¿cuál es el secreto? Es decir, es que Brasil, lo desconozco, ya tiene una cultura de mediación y conciliación. Es decir, ¿por qué todos se pusieron de acuerdo tan pronto? Porque, ¿no?, cuando hablaron con los fiscales les parecía bien, el Ministerio de Justicia, aunque a tu jefe le costó un poco no entrar, pero quiero decir, ¿cuál es el éxito? Porque aquí todavía nosotros, hablar de mediación, ¿no?, de cultura de justicia restaurativa, todavía a la administración pública le está costando. Ahora es verdad que recientemente se ha aprobado una ley que lo que pretende es desjudicializar los casos, ¿no? Pero, no sé, es decir, me gusta saber cuál es el éxito, ¿no? Sobre todo, teniendo en cuenta que todos, ponerse en la mesa tantos actores, es decir, y que todos estuvieran de acuerdo, no sé, es lo que me llama la atención. Gracias.
Sí. I don't know if culturally Brazil is a place where people like new things. They say brands test things in Brazil because people change things. They use new products. But what the strategy is, and I see that in the United States as well, is the principle of do no harm. Build something that doesn't take anything from them. It only gives options, only adds. If you really don't take any rights, don't is not prejudicial in any way, then the person would have to say, whoa, if it doesn't hurt, if it's only benefits. So you have to build something. So for example, you don't ask for a cosa juzgada quitación before you pay. You only have to say, you don't do, you take no right. So you begin by doing this. The second thing, do what you promise. Like you have to be, we call like impeccable, like pristine. Because if you don't do what you promise, then you would have problems. So, and then you create a reputation. Some people start, they are skeptical, but they say, well, I got a very good service. I'm not losing anything. Everything they said, they did. And then they talk. We say it's like opening a shop, like a business. Like people come in, they talk, the other comes in. So it's about quality, I would say. Build something with the quality of service that structurally doesn't harm people. And build on with patience. My clients hate when I say, let's open a shop. They say, no, it's a tragedy. Don't talk about shop. I say, that's the principle. Like you have to please, you have to do good service.
Pues bien, si no hay más preguntas, perdón. Una més. No, jo seré breu al final, no us preocupeu perquè tothom ja comença a mirar el rellotge.
A veure, aviam. Endavant. Volia parlar una mica. Moltes gràcies per la teva intervenció. M'ha obert molts camins. Nosaltres som d'una plataforma.
Es que le tendrás...
Més a prop.
No, y si no se lo dices en castellano, se tiene que
En castellano. Hablo en castellano. Es que, disculpa. Muchas gracias por tu presentación. Nosotros somos de una plataforma que se llama Basta Urbanismo Inundable, porque creemos que el problema de la Dana de Valencia, ha quedado claro, es el tipo de urbanismo que estamos haciendo, no solo en el área metropolitana de Valencia, en el área metropolitana de Barcelona exactamente igual, y lo que ha pasado en Valencia podía pasar aquí en Cataluña perfectamente en cualquier momento. Y ahora me centro un poco en cuál es el problema. El problema es el urbanismo, y el urbanismo se basa en las leyes que controlan el urbanismo, la ley de urbanismo. La ley de urbanismo hasta hace muy poco prohibía edificar en zonas inundables. Y esto causaba en determinados sectores económicos roces y trastornos. En Valencia los mapas de inundabilidad, los mapas de riesgo de inundación los tenían escondidos en un cajón. No querían, incluso los querían anular. Los mapas de riesgo en zonas inundables provienen de la Directiva de Inundaciones, que obligaba a que esté cartografiada los riesgos de inundación para los diferentes periodos de retorno. ¿A dónde voy? Nosotros estamos viendo que hay una planificación del incumplimiento. Se modifica la ley de urbanismo no para regular, sino para desregular. Se modifica la ley de dominio público hidráulico y la ley de aguas en el mismo sentido. Y esto los usuarios, las personas que se compran una casa o se hacen una casa, no tienen ni idea. Muchísimas personas en Cataluña y en Valencia no son conscientes de que están viviendo en una zona de riesgo. Y si, basándonos en tu presentación, estamos pensando en cómo solucionaremos este conflicto a través de las compensaciones, en esta planificación que yo decía del incumplimiento, las administraciones, los urbanistas por un lado, los de la Agencia Catalana del Agua o la Administración Hidráulica por otro, o Protección Civil, se pasan la pelota unos a otros, de manera que al final no hay ningún responsable. Todos informan favorablemente estos nuevos proyectos en zonas inundables, están informando favorablemente, pero no habrá ninguna responsabilidad porque todos se han escudado en estas puertas laterales o ventanas que permiten que se informe favorablemente sin ninguna responsabilidad. No sé si me he acabado de explicar bien.
Sí,
Quiero
sí,
decir que
comprendo.
estamos desregulando lo que en principio nos había costado mucho regular, que es tener mapas de riesgo. Y de alguna manera se han encontrado las maneras de sortear estas regulaciones para que no haya responsabilidades.
Sí, es un trabajo de advocacy con las instituciones. ¿Hay mecanismos de creación de consenso para crear las mesas de trabajo, de consenso en torno de esto?
Se acaba de crear el Observatorio de Inundaciones hace un mes, quizás.
Yo no lo sé.
Nosotros, digamos, la sociedad civil o los que no formamos parte de la administración, hemos pedido formar parte de este Observatorio de Inundaciones y de entrada nos han dicho que no, porque no somos nadie. Entonces, yo creo que vamos mal. Y las personas normales que no pertenecen a la administración o a algún departamento de lo que sea, deberían estar presentes, si no todos, tenían que tener algún representante que llevase estas inquietudes al Observatorio de Inundaciones. De entrada no nos dejan participar, yo creo que tendrán que dejarnos participar porque no hay otra manera. Sin información, el riesgo no hay manera de solucionarlo. Y la importancia para que no haya desastres se ha demostrado precisamente en las inundaciones que ha habido en Andalucía. Como veníamos del precedente de la Dana de Valencia, en Andalucía los sistemas de alerta, que eran los mismos que había en Valencia, han funcionado bastante bien. Y es fundamental que el sistema de alerta funcione, y para que funcione, la población tiene que estar informada. Y ahora hay una manera como de sortear esta información, se disimula, se explican las cosas que no son. Para recibir subvenciones de la Unión Europea tienes que cumplir un apartado que se llama precisamente DNSAC, que es no causar un daño significativo al medio ambiente. Esto lo firman como si no, sin ningún problema, y se están haciendo cosas contraproducentes, soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Hay toda una terminología de disfrazar actuaciones que realmente son actuaciones dañinas, se están convirtiendo en otra cosa. Entonces hay una problemática que yo creo que tenemos mucho trabajo por delante.
Doncs moltes gràcies. Ara sí, si no hi ha més preguntes, no voy a hacer una conferencia alternativa, sino dos palabras de cierre. Yo creo que a la pregunta de cuál es el papel de las defensorías, yo siempre diría, la frontera no puede ser esto es público, esto es privado, porque la frontera, ninguno de nosotros tenemos aquí en miles de casos que nos planteamos esa frontera de decir esto es exclusivamente público, esto es exclusivamente privado. Por ejemplo, nosotros aquí tenemos competencias en las compañías de agua, electricidad, gas, que son compañías privadas de utilidad pública, pero son compañías privadas y nosotros como defensoría tenemos esas competencias. En consecuencia, yo creo que de la conclusión más importante es cada uno desde su papel, porque es verdad que el nuestro es básicamente en defensa de esos derechos humanos que pueden afectar si, por ejemplo, te quedas sin agua porque no tienes dinero para pagarlo. Y la compañía es pública, la compañía, perdón, es privada, pero es un servicio público el del agua. Entonces, para mí, fundamentalmente de lo que él ha dicho es cómo cada uno desde nuestro papel podemos trabajar conjuntamente en esos casos, macrocasos, o cuando suceden grandes desgracias, donde no le digas a la víctima de un accidente de aviación, de un accidente como el de la Dana, de cualquiera de los que suceden, no, esto es solo público, esto es solo privado. Entonces, a mí lo que de la conclusión más importante, y lo habéis apuntado también, es si desde la Defensoría, en defensa de los derechos humanos, que es nuestra principal función, podemos ayudar a resultados conjuntos cuando se producen estas catástrofes que son fruto de una incompetencia de la administración, pues lo acaba de plantear este señor en un momento determinado, se hubiera podido hacer de otra manera, la responsabilidad también es pública, por tanto, es una confluencia de muchas cosas donde solo una respuesta unitaria de las diferentes participaciones puede dar un buen resultado. Nosotros aquí, en nuestro país, nos encanta la frontera, ¿eh? Esto es competencia vuestra. Como usted decía, no me dejan participar porque dicen que soy privado, porque igual es una cosa que otra, ¿eh? Entonces, la principal conclusión es cada uno desde su propia función debe poder entrar. Y, por ejemplo, el caso que se ha puesto, en este caso es del defensor del pueblo. Nosotros también aquí lo hemos trabajado en el tema de los abusos desde la Iglesia, es puro privado. No podemos decir que sea público. Y sin embargo, ha intervenido la Defensoría del Pueblo, hemos intervenido nosotros, seguimos interviniendo. Déjenme que acabe diciendo, las personas no estamos divididas. Esto para ti, esto para mí. Y el mejor ejemplo es que cuando todos trabajan conjuntamente, cada uno desde su defensa, se pueden llegar a resultados mejores. Nada más, obligados. Feliz estancia. Sé que vas a otros sitios. Gracias por venir, gracias por compartir y a todos ustedes, gracias por estar también hoy aquí.
Gracias.